Good evening, everyone. For those who are attending online, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on the geolocation, depending on where you are. Thank you so much for BAU and GPI for organizing this event, and Ray and crew for your outstanding work to set up everything and make it ready. So that being said, I'll introduce Mr. Paulo to give us some intro briefing statement before we start going through the details. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Professor, and thank you all. Thank to our honored guests here. Thank you all the organizers. Just very briefly, my name is Paulo von Schierer. I serve as president of the Global Policy Institute, which is a research outfit separate from but associated with Bay Atlantic University, where I also am privileged to teach political science and international relations. This event today is part of a series of joint efforts between ourselves, the Global Policy Institute, and the Bay Atlantic University faculty to try to support, bringing to the university, not just the highly qualified professors that you have in the different disciplines, but also, bring in outside experts, which is something that is done anyway. But, we try to support this effort with our own networks and also by organizing the outreach like it is this evening, whereby people who are not, university students here can also access and benefit from the presentations and discussion. And so with that, I would like to hand it over to the real people, the real organizers. And Professor?
Thank you, Mr. Powell. So before we make a deep dive on the details of this program, I would like to say something about what's happening in the world. As you know, right now in the global cyber ecosystem, there are threats, whether it's man-made or state-sponsored. So we have to be on top of it on the offensive side in a timely manner before they make things on their way and then create or wreak havoc on infrastructures, including critical infrastructures. So today's topic is on web application security. What are the various threats and risks, as well as the mitigation strategies? So, respective of the type of web application security risks, it could be a forgery or an injection or security misconfiguration or a lapse in the monitoring and logging capability. We can name it, but still there is a lot of loopholes which we need to gear towards to hack them on a timely basis and mitigate them before payloads makes their way to networks, whether it's a public or private network. So that being said, when we talk about the ML, AI, and all these recent advancements in the cyber field, it makes things more complicated. It's like adding a fuel into the fire. So how could we be abreast and mitigate those risks in a timely fashion? And that's why the reason behind convening today here. And that being said, I would like to thank, on behalf of BAU and GPI, to thank Mr. Pete for his time and willingness to share his experts on this field. For those of you who didn't know Mr. Pete, he is the CEO of Secure Consulting Solutions. It's a DC-based cybersecurity firm. He had a lot of employees under his company, and he had been working on various high-level projects on the cyber field, including supporting the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency and the Defense Agency in his past life. And then for the last 5-6 years, he's actively engaged on various high-level projects, leading the red teams who conduct this assessment. So we are very honored to have him here. And please join me in welcoming podium, and then the floor is his. So we'll have a deep dive on advanced persistent threats, as well as some live demos, which he will walk us through. So if you have any questions, just write it, and then you can bring it at the end of the session, and we can make deliberations, and then we'll take it from there. Thank you so much.
All right, well, thank you guys for having me. Z, thank you for having me. Good to meet you guys. I know it's Friday night and cyber might not be on your mind usually, but yeah, I'm going to go through, like Dr. Z said, advanced persistent threats, couple examples, couple good stories, I think, of who they are, and some actual real life scenarios where they, APTs made some real damage. So anyway, up here is my company information, like Z said. Right now, I have a contract with CISA. We're doing a lot of this stuff, replicating APTs, preventing APTs, hardening systems on the government border, trying to prevent them from getting in government networks. And it's not just CISA we're protecting, it's all of the government. They're trying to set up like a system by which CISA does most of the protection, because each agency, it's hard to manage cyber in general, and when you have multiple tiny little agencies, it's good to just get them under one. So we're kind of in that thing there. So we get a lot of interesting situations actually. So, but with that, let me go ahead and start the presentation here. So I don't know, should I stand for this thing or?
No, it's fine.
Okay, so what are APTs? They're usually government entities, which mean that they have funding. They're backed by a government. They have all the tools and resources they need, experts they need in specific areas. If they need a programmer to write something specific for the hacker, they have that kind of resource. But they're not always government backed. They're, as I'll show you in one of the stories I have, they're sometimes just very talented people, hacktivists that are talented, and they don't like what they see in whatever the case is. And so it's not always government, but usually, especially nowadays, with the way that cyber's gotten a lot of attention, a lot of people are paying attention to hardening their systems and secure coding. It's getting harder and harder and harder, or more sophisticated, I should say, to hack. That said, we do have AI, so that's a whole nother thing I won't even get into with this stuff, but that's a whole nother question we have. But I basically want to show you some stories on how they get in, what they can do, and then give you an example at the end. So the most common ways, we all know phishing. You've probably all gotten a phishing email from someone at some point, or a phishing text message. Don't worry, it's not an APT. More than likely what happened was someone came across a list with your email or your phone number in it, and they blanket shot out a phishing email, basically hoping to catch 1 out of a million people, and those are usually commonly money-based things. But an APT is going to have a very deceptive email, something that was almost indistinguishable from a real one. Maybe in some cases, even a real one, depending on how much hacking they've done. If they've hacked the company where the email came from, then it is technically a real email. But that's probably the most common way. The other way, which you probably see on movies, is exploits. It's fairly common still. It was more common back in the day, but less common now. But if you watch something like Mr. Robot, you'll see him actively hacking the border. That's still a way in. And actually, one of the stories I'm going to tell you, that was his way in. But I think phishing is still like the big way in. And then there's purchasing access. And what that is, if you were to visit like a dark web site, where they sell malicious stuff, some of the things they sell on those sites are access to networks. So basically hackers will, I don't know, just an individual hacker will basically spend his time looking for ways in the companies, maybe try out, I don't know, 50 different companies. When he finds an exploit, he gets in, creates persistence, and can send out shells because he's got a persistent shell. What I mean by shell is like a command prompt so he can access it. And he'll go on a marketplace and say, $1,000 in Bitcoin, and I'll send you a shell. Just give me your IP address. So you can actually purchase access to a network. And APTs have been known to do that too. And then there's, of course, well, I say of course, it's not common, open servers, like a server that's configured so that anyone can get into it. And before you think, oh, that's something maybe a small company would mess up, no, the NSA has messed up that and left a treasure trove of their exploits sitting on the internet, and they were found. They just forgot they deployed a server, left it up, and someone who knew what they were doing got into it and said, wow, these are 0 days, like 50 or something 0 days. So that's another way they can get in, or they could have gotten into the back infrastructure, you know, through that open server. So that's a thing, and it still happens quite a bit. So let me move on to the next slide. Stuxnet. I'm sure, well, maybe you guys have heard of it, but it's probably the most covered APT hack ever. It was done by the US government with assistance from Israel, but it was initially started by the US government. And it's a great example of the power, you know, a highly funded government, what they can do with technology and hacking. So Stuxnet, to give you some background, just a minute, let me get a sip of water too. To give you some background on Stuxnet, Iran was developing a nuclear weapons program around, I think, 2005. Israel was a partner with us, and they're upset, and the U.S. didn't want that happening as well. Now I know I'm probably butchering the, but the U.S. didn't want to take aggressive action. Israel wanted to push for bombing on their facility, and the U.S. had a better idea. They said, we have a better idea, let us handle it. So they went off on their own, the U.S., and started developing this covert program. The idea was they were going to hack their systems somehow, but through research, the centrifuges were on a separate air-gapped network, not connected to the internet. You basically had to walk into a facility, you know, and their SCADA systems were attached to these computers. SCADA is like just equipment. So they're attached to these computers, and basically there's no connectivity outside that. So how do you hack something like that? So they got a team of people together, and they started, oh, sorry, I skipped a part. The centrifuges were bought from Turkey, and they were able to intercept some of them. So they brought them back to the lab, had their engineers study them, and then they had their computer scientists study them. And they were told to look for vulnerabilities in it while they figured out a way to deploy this. So the idea was, the programmers came up with this idea, like, we'll create a worm that'll spread itself through computers, get itself on go so far as to infect the USB. So when you pull out a USB and plug it into another computer, it would infect that computer, but it had to be covert. You know, nowadays a worm, you know, it hits the news right away. So they had to use 0 days in order to create this. They stole certificates from, I think, Microsoft to sign the EXEs, make everything look legit. So if you gave it to an antivirus program, it would say, no, this is signed by Microsoft. So they'd already stolen certificates, the U.S. government, which, well, the U.S. government would say they're not part of this program. I think still they're standing by it, but it's pretty clear it came from it. But I might be diving too deep into it, but they found a vulnerability in the centrifuges where they spin them, and if they spin them enough, they break, and it causes like a big, causes them to fail. So what they did was they got the worm virus spreading. Then they made a SCADA-like man-in-the-middle system. So because they wanted the scientists to be confused, they didn't want to expose themselves. They wanted the scientists to think they weren't doing this correctly. So they had the virus intercept signals from the centrifuge to the reporting console for the scientists and report that it was spinning fine, even though it was spinning fast. And within a few weeks, these things would fail. So great, everything said and done. And I said this started in what, 2005? It took until 2012 for them to deploy this. They were so careful about writing this to keep it covert because the president at the time did not want this to hit the news at all. Because it would look like, at the time, there had never been any kind of cyber cyber attack like this, and he didn't want to start under his administration. But they needed the spreading mechanism wasn't working like they wanted it to. So they contracted the Israelis, who had a real interest in this, to better enable it to spread. Then they got it packaged together, sent it out, and it started. And it spread a lot, actually too much. They got reports back that it was going out of control, but it didn't do anything because it would only do something if it saw those systems. So it wasn't raising red flags, but they were worried because they weren't sure. They didn't have anyone inside the network to say, yes, these things are failing, it's working. They'd know by, I think, when NATO came in to do an inspection. So, so long story short, it worked. However, it was also discovered by security researchers who immediately realized the quality of this exploit. Something that was encrypted and deleted itself, when it didn't find the system, and the code, when they reverse engineered it, they're like, this is an amazing piece of software. But basically how it transferred itself was through USB onto the systems, and then the scientists had no idea. They had no idea until the security researchers actually reported what happened, because it was written so well they couldn't even find it on their systems. So that's the power of a nation state. They spread from, I don't know, maybe a network in Europe to a specific network in Iran just through a worm, that was undetected by people looking for it, So, I mean, that is the most impressive APT, I think, out there right now. And this is back in 2012. So you can imagine what governments are doing now. Because before this, I don't think there was many, at least we don't know about it. And this is real quick, what I was just talking about here, how it spread. Yeah, but it damaged their centrifuges. It didn't really blow up like that. I thought that would make it just a good, piece. But yeah, so the implications of this, though, other nations saw what happened once it was exposed in the news, and there was a rush to get cyber teams. Iran itself said, we need to get on this. They had their own cyber team, and they made a big attack the year after Stuxnet was released in 2012. They brought down Saudi Aramco, actually. Like, they wiped their network clean. Again, they didn't take credit for it, but it was believed to be them. So this was kind of the start, like the gunfire, starting gun for nations to start building cyber teams. And then we're still seeing that now. That's why cyber is so important. And you find there's a lot of jobs. Everyone's hiring for it, and everyone's hiring for defense because of stuff like this. But yeah, that Stuxnet was the big one that kind of started everything. That said, like I told you earlier, there are also hacktivists that do their own work. And this story, I think, this guy is still anonymous. They still haven't found out who he was. And he has done several other notable hacks since this. I think he's one of the best. Like I said, I don't know who he is. But this guy, there used to be a company called the Hacking Group. And they weren't the first company to do this, but their sole purpose was to find exploits and sell them to governments. Not any government in particular, anyone who paid them enough money, kind of. But they were also doing stuff like spying on journalists and stuff that is looked down upon or illegal. So this hacker sees what's going on, knows they're doing this, and says, "No, I'm going to expose you guys. I don't like this." So he takes his time and inspects their border, their cyber border, their IP range, gets an idea of what they're running on the edge, and this is what I mean by edge exploits. Finds a VPN server. I don't know if you guys have ever VPN in, to a job or maybe even school. The VPN server has to sit on the edge, so it's a good target. But when he saw it, he saw that there were no exploits out there for it at the time. So he said, "Well, I'll find my own exploit." And he did. He spent 2 weeks researching, found an exploit, started using it, didn't like it because he couldn't get enough data through it. So he found a way to sideload an entire OS onto the VPN server without the company knowing. And it was an appliance. It wasn't just like a Windows server, it was an appliance. So that alone is, I mean, I wish I could say I could do something like that, but I guess that's, but yeah, he was able to find the 0 day. And then from there, he just started listening. So something I forgot to mention about APTs earlier is he spent about 6 months on the network undetected, not doing much, just listening, tiptoeing around, found credentials, found an encrypted drive that he couldn't crack. So he realized all he had to do was wait for an administrator to open it. And when he did, he copied all the information off. And then, this is an interesting piece. They had an attached network with all their covert stuff, like, you know, the reporters they were going after. That was all supposed to be air gapped. But he realized quickly that there was not an air gap there. Like there was a connection that not even the company knew about, but he spent so much time researching the network that he realized he didn't have to find a way to bridge it. He just go through that thing. And he ended up getting all that information, downloading every document the company had, and then hacking their Twitter, logging in and exposing their own stuff on their own Twitter. It was pretty impressive for activists. But one thing, so he did this in order to prevent, he wanted to expose them and show the world that what they were doing is wrong. But in looking at it, I think this kind of like was what I just mentioned about the nations starting to hire teams. This was kind of the starting gun for hacker to hire companies, because this got so much attention in probably 2015 that companies like the NSO group, who actually was around during this time, these weren't big, they all rose up to power after this. And then you frequently have NSA contractors who work on these teams as govies, you know, retiring or quitting to start their own businesses to sell exploits back to the government. So this was kind of just, again, was what he did to expose it, did it cause more companies? You know, was it like the three-headed Hydra? Did he cut one off to two grow back? I guess it's up for debate. But yeah. And another route, of course, is the North Korean route that I brought up, which is they're big on sending people for job interviews under the alias of someone else. And if they get the job, then they basically have an administrator in the network who can do whatever they want. It's not a bad technique. They just need to polish up on theirs, because their rate of getting caught is really high. You can actually go on YouTube and just search for North Korean interview hacker or something, and it'll bring up a lot of these interviews are really awkward, because at first they were just throwing people who knew about computers at interviews for highly advanced positions. So there's some really uncomfortable interviews, but they've gotten better because they've actually infiltrated. The other thing they'll do is they'll get programmers that they have as part of GitHub repos, which is open source, and they'll start contributing, and they'll spend 2 years helping, and people will gain, in the open source community will gain their trust, and they'll stop looking at what they're submitting, because like always 2 years of great code. Once people's eyes are taken off what he's doing, that's when he backdoors the code. It's part of the supply chain. It's shipped out to vendors, and then suddenly they got a backdoor and 50,000 different things. So it is a pretty effective strategy, the North Korean strategy. But that's more of like a human element. It's not exciting hacking, but still effective. Yeah, so I can move on to the labs, but if you guys want to talk about any of the APT stuff I just brought up, we could probably do it right now, and then I can move to the labs.
Thank you, Pete. So he will cover some walkthrough on the lab to see live demos. so that we can conceptualize the discussions which we made. So as you said, adversaries are really changing the techniques, tactics, and procedures. So we have to follow suit, and then we have to be strong on the offensive side, and we have to play ahead of them. Otherwise, it's gonna be like a race between a supersonic jet and an ox cart. It will be two really incomparable things. So as he already stated, the AI portion is really getting the momentum. So the thing with AI is that there is no machine learning bill of material like in a software. There is an issue with Adobe. You will communicate with Adobe to patch or to get or to make them accountable. But so in this case, somebody's just writing the code, and then a model will just ingest the model to your mirror without any rigorously vary that data. And then there's no accountability there. Whom do you wanna, if you just identify something on that model, could you just download from GitHub? Whom do you think would be accountable for? I mean, there is no specific company who's responsible for that specific software. I know companies, the ChatGPT, they have the enterprise version now. Okay, they're accountable, but they are the only one, as far as I know. So those are the things which we need to consider. You know, having that accountability. Whoever is creating that model has to take accountability. So government should work to address that. Rather, it's a public-private partnership sort of thing to get a better and safer future for everyone on the cyber world, specifically. Yeah, so that being said, if you're ready, we can walk through the live demos on how this web application security risks are and how they make their way in, how they go through and then do the payloads, and then what are the various mitigation strategies. Thank you.
I can hold this back here. Oh, yeah, he's got one. I can put it up on the table here.
Okay.
Actually, put it on the stand right here. Leave that stand too. Right here, down here.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Perfect. All right. Okay. I guess that's good. Okay, so what I hope they can hear me on here. I don't know if
Probably not.
yeah.
You need to get it closer to your mouth.
Okay.
It's okay. This is sensitive.
That's
so
pretty
this is
sensitive.
big.
Okay, cool. So what I want to show you are just some basic web exploits, but before I get into like the actual hack part, the tool I'm using, what you're seeing right here, is a pretty for web exploitation. If you want to look at hacking websites or looking into vulnerabilities of websites, this is like the #1 tool, the most preferred tool for web penetration testers. And what it does is when you open up your browser and you click on something, a request is sent. And actually, really, the whole time the site's open, things are being sent in the background that you don't even think about. So what this tool does is it gets in the middle of that. Your browser sends a request. This stops it so you can inspect it. And you can do a lot with that, which is what I'm about to show you. I wanted you to know where this tool sits, basically between the browser and the server. Because when you have it, it doesn't matter if you have a phone app or you're just browsing on the laptop on Chrome, it's going back and forth with the server. Same thing with a phone app. I'd be doing it the same way here with the same tool. So that said, let's see which ones. I kind of made a little list here. So we'll do the money transfer one first. Let me see if I have that pulled up. Money transfer. Let's do this one first. So this is an example where I'm logged in as user 1. And I shouldn't be able to touch any other people's money, right? Everyone has $1,000. But in an insecure banking app, which, by the way, this example, I hope your bank wouldn't have their web app set up like this because it's incredibly insecure. What I'm going to do is transfer money from someone else's bank to my bank. So my bank has $1,000 sitting in it. And what I'm going to do, since I am user 1, my transfer amount is $1,000. Okay, so I'm going to send 1,000 to user 2, $1,000. And what I'm going to do is see what that request looks like here. So as you can see, this is what happens when you click on something on a website. This is the background. What you see here are like the headers.
Can you zoom in a little bit?
Let me see. You know, I should have, there is a way to do
I
this.
mean, they can see well on Zoom.
They can?
For the-
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, for all the people online, sorry if it's really tiny. So what we got here is what a request looks like behind the scenes. As you can see, there's these down here are called parameters. And you see a recipient ID and a sender ID. So I'm sender ID 1. I wonder what would happen if I changed it to one of these IDs here. Like let's say user 3. So sender ID, user 3, recipient ID, well, I sent it to user 2. Let's change that back to me. See if I can get myself $1,000 extra. So I changed sender ID to someone else, the recipient ID to me, transfer amount $1,000. And now that I've edited this request, it's being held here before it reaches the server. I'm going to release it now. And we're going to see what happens. Oh, whoa, look at that. It's made $1,000. It's not that easy. But that's to give you an example of how setting up an insecure, believe it or not, hopefully a bank wouldn't do this, but a lot of websites really do make mistakes like that. Simple things where they don't think people are going to intercept the response or request, or they make mistakes where the data sent to them. I won't get into JavaScript, but yeah, they make a lot of mistakes. So let me give you another good example here. What did I have up here? Buying tickets. Let me see if I remember what this one is too. I took a look at this just so I didn't get up here and you know, ticket sales, enter the number of tickets. Okay. So again, we're going to intercept this request. The price of a ticket's $10. The amount of money in my, okay. So I'm going to buy 100 tickets. I'm going to intercept the request here and see what it looks like. Again, not much here to protect it. So ticket money, so that must be the price, ticket money, and the amount is 100. I wonder if I just removed a 0 here, what would happen? And this example here is a better example of what you might find on certain websites. Like something simple like the price, changing the price. Yeah, so I removed a 0. It said ticket money was $10 a ticket. I bumped it down to 1. And I bought 100 tickets, which should have been 1,000. Yeah, there we go. Tickets bought, $100, 100 tickets. So yeah, preventing something like this is a little bit tough. You need some kind of validation system in the back end. Like Z, actually, you want to explain how you validate something like that in the back end? Because I don't know how they teach it here, or if you have any specific way you want to teach it. But
normally it goes to the input validation, the actual code, respect of the whether it's a Python or it's made in Java. You have to make sure there is a validation. They have to run that validation for actually making that thing live on a code environment. They have to check for any flaws. As a matter of fact, like a couple of months ago, the commercial bank of Ethiopia, they had a flaw, and everybody was just getting money out of the ATM in millions. It was because it took them like 8-9 hours to start the thing. So everybody was just go there, just put whatever money you want, and then as long as there is money on that ATM, so all ATMs, like especially college students, they were the big suspect. So it was like a big issue. So that's one real scenario. It may happen, just like, you know, absence of validation on the code which you wrote. So it's always good to compile and run that validation prior to running that thing on a code environment.
yeah, so to follow up with what he said, in the example where I said the transfer amount, where I just changed my user and sender ID, that could be easily validated. You know, that could be set as a cookie or something, so they can say, hey, it doesn't match the cookie, you can't just edit stuff like that. There's ways of doing it, and even that, what I just described, is a bad way of doing it. There are much better ways, but they're not doing any of it here. But like I said, you probably wouldn't see this in a bank, but you do see this sometimes when you probably know when you browse a site, like this is kind of janky. I have the same feeling when I look at when I look at apps to test. When I look at the site, I could tell that there wasn't much love put into it. So, so this one's a little bit more of an advanced one. Because I need to log in to see what this looks like. So it gives me a username, password of user, okay. I'll log in. So I'm logged in, and the goal is to change the admin password. You can see I'm logged in as user, and I know I'm flipping through this fast. I'll explain in a minute what I'm looking at here. Okay, so I'm logged in as user. I think what I'm going to do is, so this is called a CSRF request, cross-site request forgery. This one requires interaction from another person. And what I'm going to do here is change my own password to see what that looks like. And the reason I'm doing that, I'll put my new password as test. The reason I'm doing that is because I want to figure out how to craft a CSRF request that I could send to you. Like, let's say one of you guys were the admins here. What I'm trying to do with the CSRF request is change your password so I could log in as you guys. In order to do that, I'm going to change my own password, which I just changed to test. Oh, and I can see here, it's just a simple, what's called get request, which hopefully you wouldn't see with the password change request, because all it's validating is that you have a cookie and that you have the right parameters. And cookies are always sent, whatever site, I won't get into the depth of it, but this is bad for this scenario. I won't dive into the weeds and keep you guys. So what I'm going to do, now that I realize this, I have to find a way to send this to the admin. And it looks like they have a chat bubble here. And I'm just going to paste this link in here. So what I'm pasting in there is what I sent to change my own password just a minute ago. When I did this, this is what it looked like in the back end. See if I can make this bigger. You can see where I put test, new password, new confirmed password. So theoretically, if this admin clicks on this, it should reset his password to test.
Not user.
No, not
Yeah.
user, because it's
already.
right. That could be that would almost be a way of well, I could change it, but that would be a way of preventing it if they had the username in one of the headers that I couldn't touch. But they don't. They just have the password and the new password. And then his cookies will be sent, because he has administrator cookies, they'll be sent with the request. So we'll see here. This is automated to automatically click on it, obviously. And now let's log out and see what happened here. Oops. Where's the log out? Hold on a second here. Log out. There we go. All right. So let's try admin. Test. Oh, we're admin. So that's an example of the CSRF. So stuff like that, CSRF could be easily prevented. The reason this even works is because when you browse a site, you know, when you close your browser down, like Gmail, close your browser down, shut your computer off, whatever. When you open it up again and go to Gmail, your mail pulls right up, because the browser is built to save cookies. And when you browse a site, it immediately applies all the cookies that you stored, sends it right to Google and says, here's where I was at last, you know, and Google says, oh, you're logged in, here's all your information. So when you send a GET request or like a link to someone, like if I sent that to Z would visit that site and it would send all the cookies and say, oh, you're admin, okay, you're logged in. Oh, and you want to change your password? Sure. Now I get in basically through that way, you know.
Intercept the session.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the user will create some session, and then before you are just creating a forged session with the server, so the server doesn't know which user, but just accepting the connection, and then that request, that password change will go to that different person who just hijacked the session as opposed to the original person.
Like being in the middle.
A man in the middle.
Right.
Exactly.
So that's what that tool I was showing you does. It's basically man in the middle, my own session. But what I'm doing is I'm learning about the app and figuring out ways to exploit it by looking at it in the back end. And honestly, like poking around websites is the easiest way to, learn something about it. You have to step through and learn about how it works and functionality and things like that. So that's CSRF. I could show you guys one more thing. APIs are big now. In this example, I guess it wants me to delete me picture here. If we look at the back end request here, hold on, sorry, the Zoom thing is getting in the way here. There we go. Okay. We got to figure out how to even make a delete request. So in my industry, that means kind of messing with the app here. It looks like I have an account. So I'll log in and see what a user can do. A user shouldn't be able, well, I don't even have access to delete that picture. I see. Well, let me just try and delete one picture to see what a delete request looks like. So I'll delete this one. It's deleted. Now let's see what that looked like. Okay. It sent a delete request and it just had the image name in it. Easy. So I bet you don't even need cookies to do this. I'm going to go back to all wallpapers. I didn't have access to that as a user, the delete me picture. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to send this to request that I just showed you here to a repeater, to a replayer. It replays request and you can edit it. I'm going to paste in delete me.jpg, which I got there. See if it works without a cookie. Yeah, I didn't even need a cookie to do it. Oh, I have one here. But it deleted it. I shouldn't have had access to that. Let's see if I refresh the page, if it's still there. Yep, it's gone. So it's real easy to do. That's not securing an API. I mean, there was cookie usage there. You could have attributed what images you had permissions to delete to your cookie even, but they're not doing anything. They're just assuming that since you can't see it, you can't delete it. And that's not how you should think if you're trying to do penetration testing. You should think out of the box and try and do things that weren't intended, or maybe you could tell that they intended for other people not to do. You should test that, because in this case, they're like, oh, they don't see the image, you won't be able to delete it. And that's obviously incorrect. Just like when you change the bank account number, they're probably thinking they're not going to see what's happening on the back end, but you can, So, yeah. So, I mean, these are real easy beginner level kind of exploits. You could dive really deep on all these and get really advanced into how these exploits work, or into how you can do them. But hardening against something like this is really just making sure that you do things like CSRF tokens and best practices. I'm trying to think of some other ways to, besides redesigning the app or inserting functionality into it, but it's, yeah. You could do something like use a WAF. I don't know if you guys have learned about WAFs, but that's a real Band-Aid solution to fixing vulnerabilities like this. Really, the secure coding aspects are important when you build the app.
That's so to add on what Pete says, yeah. So there's also secure deny by default. So most applications and tools, especially appliances, that are just set deny by default, and you just manually configure specific ports or IPs to traverse through that. That will minimize the thing. And lately, most organizations are heading through secure by design, so that it's always good to let the vendors, harden their system as opposed to the recipients or the clients, worry about securing and hardening and all those craziness. Because when the device is out of the box, how many of us know which area to weaken, which ports to disable, which protocol to enable or disable, or which services to enable or disable? Just simply log in, create an account, and start using it. But there's a lot of listening ports at the back end, just listening, ready to accept, any connection. So it's more about creating an awareness, and that's what we are here. And that's what the purpose of those cyber courses, creating an awareness, so that once you are on that field, you will start creating that awareness, and then it will create that cascading effect. And it's a collective thing. as mid-size, it's hard to know everything, but we all have to share our little experiences on it so that collectively we can make a difference. So that being said, I think that's all we have. So we really would like to thank Pete, and then I would really like to have some clapping for him. Yeah, so now we'll, the open is open for discussion, questions. Those who are virtually, you can just raise your hand, and then you can
stop sharing the screen too.
yeah start yeah. So feel free to pitch in and then ask questions.
May I? Sorry, I am the interloper here because obviously not being even remotely, conversant with any of the science and the technology and the expertise that all of you in this room have. But as somebody who's looking at public policy and international affairs and international threats, my impression by reading, the open media, non-specialized media, is that we're always on a reactive mode. Oh, this happened. Oh my God. I mean, are we going to do something to plug that hole? Let's do this. Oh my God, the Office of Personnel Management, I'm sure you know that, was a million, I don't know how many personal data
Yeah,
of all
Just
people.
about everyone, yeah.
Yeah, everybody working for the US government, whoa, that was all gone. And people say, oh, look at that, the roof is leaking, let's get some tiles. So this is kind of, I know it's very superficial and probably not very, very illuminating, but I have the impression for the layperson who doesn't know anything about what you are doing, you and the professionals, is that it's people are busy trying to plug holes as opposed to creating, ideally, a defense perimeter that is impregnable. And this leads me to a specific question, which is a nightmare of everybody who is in public policy. The unfortunate day in which somebody figures out a way to penetrate the US electric grid, freezes everything, we have no electricity. In 48 hours, the United States doesn't exist anymore. I mean, that's saying a lot, Maybe it's 24 hours. This is the window of time we have before every system and every element of society is, completely destroyed. How realistic is that threat of the freeze? Because we know the Russians have done it in Estonia, they've done it in here and there. They've tried different things. How, and again, I'm not asking you to tell me, oh, no, we're absolutely perfectly fine, this will never happen. But is this a realistic fear of people like me, or is this an exaggeration?
It's not far-fetched. I think the only reason that really hasn't happened is because these networks, the grid, we'll say the power companies, are kind of private and segregated from each other. So they'd have to penetrate numerous ones to create the reaction they want. However, actually, Z and I under CISA work for an agency or work for a specific department that is actually working on, has that same fear right now. So what they're doing is kind of deploying, it's more of an encouragement thing right now. It's not mandated, but they're deploying sensors on those networks that pull back logs as an early alert system, because the government has expressed the same concern. They don't want the grid going down, and how can they help? I know it's a hard thing for a private company to say, sure, bring in your government equipment and listen to all our traffic. It's a hard sell, but they're trying to get that data back as an early alert system. And we've worked on a couple solutions, like, for anonymous alerting. So how do we keep the client safe? How do we keep them anonymous? How do we anonymize their data, but also get the data we need for the alerts? It's a tough project. Actually, really, you've kind of led that up, I've assisted with Z, but it's something they're working on, because that is a fear of everyone. And it's doable to an extent. It'd be big and challenging just because there's, it's not one network that they'd have to penetrate, it's numerous ones. But like I said, like the 0 days you saw there in Stuxnet, that could have easily penetrated all those networks. So it's a fear. And it's surprising something hasn't happened yet, you know?
That to add on what he says, you raised a valid question. So it's always good to assume things will happen instead of, being surprised by the attack. So that's why there is a lot of policy initiatives, special publications and directives, the Federal Information Security Management Act, the risk management framework. Now NIST published a risk management framework for AI in critical infrastructure, in the supply chain. There are executive orders. So every department and agency, also federal, local, state, territorial, and tribal level, they are beefing up their security so it's a collective effort. So it's a collective grade. So I think the government's aware and they are really doing great on that regard. But to add on that, the global cyber ecosystem, it's a collective responsibility. So that's a key thing. It's a collective responsibility. There has to be a consortium, to tackle globally, because DNS, there are root DNS, root servers scattering across the globe in every continent. So there are fiber cables from New York to London, passing through Atlantic all the way. So it's a collective responsibility. So every state nation has to, openly and willingly, pitch in and how to collaborate. It's not like add to a specific nation. So we have to collectively address that, and then we have to create that consortium as well. Thank you. Any other question?
There's a question on.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry.
let me find the chat here.
They can just ask.
They can ask out there. Okay. Yeah.
We got some questions on there. Yeah, go ahead. You want me to read their questions?
Oh,
I mean, they
Uh,
said-
but
yeah, go ahead.
ask.
We can
I
hear
think
you.
you can. Yeah. Go ahead.
Can I go ahead and ask a couple of questions?
Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Thank you for the great presentation and the organizers of this session. Really helpful and timely information. I have a couple of questions. The first one is, what strategies can developers use to ensure the security of third-party libraries or frameworks, used in their web applications? Maybe they are not in-house developed. Maybe they are using third-party libraries in a state, and in that case, what security measures they can, or strategies they can follow. And the second question is, how is AI or machine learning, how could that be leveraged to both identify and exploit web application vulnerabilities? And what can developers do to stay ahead on AI? Thank you.
So with with the libraries, when you develop, I'm assuming you're talking about like JavaScript libraries and things of that nature.
Yeah, those kinds, yeah.
So there's tools that track the major ones like Angular for vulnerabilities based on the Angular version or whatever you're using. But the issue is, even if it's vulnerable, you might not be using the specific function within whatever library you're using. So it's really and in that said, I stopped myself from saying if it's not vulnerable, you're okay, because even if it's not a vulnerability within the library you're importing, you have to make sure that there's not functionality within the function you're importing that allows for something else to happen in your application, if you understand what I'm saying. So like, if you're importing a library from like an Angular, repo, make sure you know all the functionality of what that particular thing does, because it might have like move functionality. You might be able to send. So like it's not really answering your question. You have to really read the manual is what I could say. And of course, maybe some kind of fuzzing, like a code analyzer, to make sure it's not easy. The answer to your question is easy to do, which is why we're still in business, penetration testers.
Busy.
Thank you, Dr. Awaka, for your questions. Yeah, as Peter stated, the first thing we need to do, we have to conduct rigorous third-party vetting. So before implementing the special API related, we have to conduct rigorous vetting on a test and evaluation environment or staging or dev environment. Because most organizations even don't have a supply chain unit to conduct that vetting as well. So that's one. For instance, if it's static coding, we use a static fortify analyzer. If it's dynamic, there are different tools as well. So dissect all the APIs, the dependencies, the connections, the connectivity, and also we can run dependency checker to see which API is dependent on what, the calling, the function, all the details. So it's really good to make a deep dive on it and dissect each and every connection it may have on that dependency. Otherwise, we will introduce risk. So conduct rigorous separate scanning and supply chain side vetting as well. And for the AI, as said, it's really getting the momentum. So you may probably know it, but there is a company called Protect AI. They are really on the forefront. They have more than 25 different scanning tools tailor-made for different tools, for web scanning, for programming aspect, for the models, for the training models. So if you had a chance, I recommend everyone to be a member of that group too. It's a new initiative, and they have really, really a lot of cool stuff, especially on the scanning part on AI-related tools and how to augment or use AI to beef up your overall security in every field, maybe it's in a database, on the cyber, on the vulnerability assessment. So search for protectai.com, and then you will see a lot of tools listed there.
One thing about the AI too, and that sounds like AI. I've never used that or that site, but it sounds like that's geared for vulnerability finding. But if you know enough about AI prompts, you probably don't even need a prompt, but you could develop a prompt to instruct an AI just like a regular chat GPT, like 4.0, to find vulnerabilities for you as well. You could pop in a pretty big JavaScript library. And this goes back to answering your question a little bit more about how to find them. You could actually dump in an entire library into ChatGPT and say something like, you're a security expert, please help me find vulnerabilities within this JavaScript file, and it'll spit out basically what you want it to do. What you're talking about, I think, is geared towards that, but if you don't have the money, or you could probably just use a regular AI, which I missed the whole question about AI. Was it about
how we leverage AI to
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes. Thanks so much.
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure.
Yeah. So, back in July with CrowdStrike.
Oh yeah. Yep.
And obviously, like a lot of systems were affected, like airlines and everything. I guess my question is, because these people have like robust IT infrastructures already in place, but like what could have been done like to make sure these systems like be resilient to such a problem,
With that, see the problem with that, I mean, really that fell on CrowdStrike, really dropped the ball on that one. I believe you couldn't even reboot it, right? You had to be there manually. Yeah. So they really dropped the ball on that one, and that's because of the amount of trust we give to a software like CrowdStrike. Really, you'd have to say we got to start looking at how we do our antivirus stuff. Are we giving them too much permission to do this? Like they should be able to block things in memory, but they shouldn't be able to, yes. What you're asking really is a deeper problem with antivirus in general. They have too much control of our systems, and now look what's happening if they fail. And then we have to rely on these companies too. So like, what do you do? The fact that happened, it was bad. It was a real bad situation, but I think it brought to light how we should start handling stuff like this. Maybe operating systems like Windows should start allowing some sort of secure API for antivirus instead of giving them so many permissions. Okay, I can sum it up as just better way of handling how to handle threats on your own operating system. But that's
what they did was basically, they messed up. It was a small coding error, but it brought light to what I was just talking about. We need to address how to better handle stuff like this. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. So you already covered it, but to give it from a bigger perspective. So back in the days before pre-cloud, everything was on premise. You have your organization, everything is hosted on premise. You just walk into your data center. You have authentication, maybe sign in or badge, wherever. So everything is manageable. You know what you are doing. You know what updates you are pulling, and then you are managing everything. Everything was under your purview. You have a little SOC or NOC center to monitor things down, up, and in real time, so on and so forth. Once we are in this cloud world, as Pete said, we give much more trust to those cloud service providers. So most organizations, they simply enjoy like the simplicity, like we don't have to worry more, just give everything on them. So things like that nature, it's hard. Even if you have a big, great cyber resilience, it's hard because they are just out of band. I mean, it's out of our control. So it's always good to keep continuous assessment and monitoring of those infrastructures. Even though it's on the cloud, maybe there is a cloud access security brokerage where they can sit as an intermediary between the cloud service providers and the clients. So they will validate, for instance, if you are hosting something on Microsoft Azure, they will validate on behalf of your company to check with Microsoft by conducting all those third-party, auditing and, assessment, and then they will follow up on those, poems or any findings. But most organizations, especially small and medium organizations, they simply host something in the cloud, and that's it. They kept on doing their work. They don't know what's happening at the other side, So it's always good for organizations to revamp their overall cybersecurity policy. And okay, it's good to host things on the cloud. You don't have to spend money on the physical infrastructure. That's good, but on the meantime, we have to be vigilant and worry of the day-to-day operations on the data which we hosted on the cloud. I know those companies who provide us services like CrowdStrike. And remember, 2-3 years ago, there was the same incident for one of that company with the Orion software.
What happened?
In 2020 or 21, there was a company like with big magnitude. I forgot that. They have Orion monitoring system, and it was hacked for 6 months.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly. So yeah.
Yeah, it's really with the AV thing though. I think it's just a matter. I'm trying to remember exactly what it was technical wise, but it has to do with system calls and the amount of permissions given to it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
For that one, they are just doing some more. That Orion software got
The same
hacked,
thing?
yeah, for like 6-7 months, and it was not known until after the fact. So for 6 months, it was being hacked.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's probably a
So
supply
the same
chain thing.
concern.
Yeah.
So that's a very valid question.
Yeah, it was a good one. Yeah.
Any other question?
Yes, I have one, sir. So I wanted to know the system you were using when you were doing the penetration testing.
You mean I don't have it pulled up there. You mean the tool I was using or what? Yeah, it's called Burp Suite. It's free. You can download it. There's also newer tools coming out. I said that's like the de facto tool for web testers. It is, but there's other ones coming out. They're already out. I just can't recall their name. But if you look into Burp Suite, it's free. Anyone can download it. There's a pro version that does like automated scanning and stuff, but you don't need it if you're just looking at stuff. You can actually just start playing around now.
Is it only on Kali Linux you get it, or
you get it on Windows too? They make it for any operating system. For instance, I didn't have Kali on there. That was Debian. It was a Linux system, but yeah, they make it for anything. So yeah, you can play with it tonight if you don't. I think you could even download it on your mobile phone, but it's not really user friendly. It's kind of hard, So yeah, you can go play around with it today.
Yes, sir. I have a question. It's actually an experience that happened to me 2 days ago. you are talking about phishing emails, the links that sent. So I was expecting a package from USPS. So the package was returned. But later I received a text message with a link that I should click on that link to enter my zip code, because the package was returned. The package was returned because of an invalid zip code. So the link was okay to me, because the protocol HTTPS it was secure, everything was okay. So but when I clicked on the link, it directed me to it opened another portal where I should enter my card details, that I should pay like $15 for them to send my package again.
You didn't do it, right?
No, I didn't do it.
Good.
So I want to know. I didn't do it.
So I can't help you with that.
Yeah. So fortunately for me, I went to the USPS office. I was confused. The USPS was very close to us, so I went there. Actually, they said they didn't do that, but it was the link was, for me, it was secure. Everything was okay. So I don't know how that happened. If it's actually
Well, I think it was two things. I think one, so you ordered something from like another website and they gave you like a USPS tracking number, right? Something like you bought something on somewhere and they sent you a tracking number.
Yeah, because the number that sent the link, it's a foreign number. It's not a US number.
So two things. Simple one is maybe it was just coincidental timing, but the other thing it could have been was whatever website you bought it from, somehow that information could have been sold to data brokers, and data brokers, a malicious data broker, either lost the list or they're malicious and use that list to send out a phishing scam to you, or that website was hacked and the data was leaked. That's a little bit more. It's more likely someone bought your data from somewhere and said, "Oh, he just got a package sent to him," and they added you to a list of other people whose data were sold that were getting packages shipped.
Yeah, and this phishing attempt is common during holiday season. It's just random.
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, now
They would assume that, out of 20,000, maybe 10 of them might order something and then got returned.
I bet you all got one because it's Prime Day or
Prime Day,
Black
exactly.
Friday. You're all probably
And that's common during holiday season.
Yeah.
And the company which I was discussing about the SolarWinds. It was a big-
SolarWinds. Oh,
it's
wow.
the same thing. They have a software called Orion. It's a monitoring tool, and it was been hacked. Almost all agencies have that tool. So giving that,
Oh, yeah.
using that tool. So some organizations like the one which you mentioned, and then SolarWinds and big companies, they have services in abundance. So when something happens, it's out of the what it's hard to contain it. And so it's always good to have that cyber resilience in your organization, so that at least you can still working where something is happening, still the service, there's no disruption. Keep on moving and still trying to troubleshoot. So that's another approach to, work on, have a robust cyber resiliency approach, so that if something happens, there is no, service disruption or outage. Still, you are trying to mitigate the issue. At the same time, the system will keep on continuing. Sort of continuity of operation, cool strategy as well.
Yeah, at the time, I had something in my mind, because it's like normally in some firewalls, like when certain things happen, we do bypass, right? Like for certain connections. So like maybe they didn't think of it, or like what could have really made it? Because it took very long, like 6 hours.
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
At that magnitude, sometimes it's hard. A single mistake, and then it's not one or two clients. It's just in millions, maybe globally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's one more question online. Let's see. Oh, someone wrote it out. I have a quick question. For example, I'm using Azure Cloud. So maintaining a static IP, NSG, firewall, Microsoft Defender. Is this enough to protect a server, or anything else I need to do? I mean, I can't say yes to that. It's not. Is it so easy to bypass? We see you got cloud, maintaining a static IP, NSG, firewall. So if you answer your question, if you have any open ports, if you have all your ports closed, it'd be hard to penetrate it without some kind of like phishing or something to get on there.
Services.
Yeah, and services reaching out. It'd be very hard. If you have something listening on use port 22 open, as long as you have SSH key authentication, sometimes 8080. Okay, now it's slipping out, huh? What's on 8080? It sounds like a web. Yeah, it sounds like something web. Well, I don't know. The more you talk, the more I get worried about your network.
Just,
It's good to have that comprehensive connectivity of that thing. It's hard to say, oh, there's a server with this
Right.
port protocol, and then is it secure? So we have to see it from a holistic approach. What is it like? It's a company, it's a private server, it's for your home lab, or it's just organization. What is the connectivity? What are the dependencies? It's connected to
Yeah.
different switches, routers. How? I mean, we have to get all the details so to give like a better insight.
Yeah,
of
and I
the
mean,
issue.
you can have a web server running and it's not dangerous. Like I've gone to companies and I've seen like a web server running that default, like, welcome to Apache thing. And I'm like, ooh, this is gonna be good. They haven't done anything here, but everything's turned off. It's just on the default page and I can't do anything. So that doesn't mean, just because you have something listening doesn't mean you're vulnerable. You just gotta be, secure.
That's a bad statement. Any other question?
Oh, you said thank you. You're welcome.
If not, then I would really like to thank BAU and GPI for hosting it, and also for the university, the overall university management for facilitating this as well, and the students for spending your precious time here to get some knowledge from our discussion, and hope you got some knowledge, or at least some, sometimes you never know what incites you. So it's always good to attend meetings like that. You may hack up something and get interested in something, and then that would be your destiny or your future career path. So it's always good to attend meetings. I strongly recommend, to participate as much as you could. And Ray and crew, thank you so much for setting up all the environment and the infrastructure here, so that everybody, those who are online and here in person, can pitch in at the same time, despite the geographic limitation. And on top of that, Pete, my colleague, my coworker, and as a passionate hacker and so helpful always, whenever this is second time to accept my request. So I'm really thankful to her. Sometimes it's hard for people to make it, but he's always willing to help. And he's just doing beyond and above. So I would really like to appreciate him on behalf of the organizers and BAU as well. And,
Thank you so much. We too, we appreciate you coming.
No, thank you for having me.
And those who are attending online, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate your time as well. Hopefully we'll meet you in another event like this, and we'll keep in touch. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you guys.